Share figured out. Okay. Great. I will assume you can see my screen. If you can't, somebody please jump in and let me know. Um, so we're going to talk about strategic planning. Uh, there was a long time when I used to use this word. I didn't really know what it meant. Strategy. What is strategy? And you know, you've probably all studied it, worked on it, certainly pondered it with respect to your ventures. There's a lot of different definitions. We're not here for, you know, an academic experience, but I will say that to me, the simplest definition for strategy is the one that sticks with me the most. And I think of it like this: in a business, especially as founders, you're responsible for everything. And strategy is real simple. Strategy is the very difficult decision about what not to do, because there are a million and one things we know we can do. And what really makes it interesting is when we start to put up those guardrails and we say we are about this, not that. So keeping that in mind, we're going to break into, you know, some sub segments of the conversation and talk about vision, execution, and measurement. All three important, you know, to the big picture. So, from an objectives point of view, what am I hoping we get out of this hour together? First of all, so you have some tools and some perspectives to help clarify the problem that your business addresses. Every business only exists and only thrives because it's solving a problem. Absent that, there's no business, there's no future, right? And so, really understanding it right down to the syllable and being able to articulate it, so important. And really what comes with that is then finding a way to fit it to the customer need, you know, in order to sort of deliver on your promise. The second piece is we're going to define your value prop and really focus on a unique value prop. It's one thing to say we're good at something. It's another thing to say we are the only ones who do it quite like this. And that's where real differentiation is going to come from. The third and final piece, we're going to establish and track some of those success metrics, those KPIs that matter. Almost anything can be measured. Some of it's easier to measure than others, but really the strategic decision on your part is to say, if we are in this business, then how do we know if we are succeeding? And really, it's a simple question with a very complicated, laborious process of arriving at the answer. I'm not going to pretend we'll solve it today, but hopefully at least gather some perspectives that you take with you in your journey. So a little bit about myself. I'll go real quick through my background just to put this all in perspective. You know, I got my start as a media agency founder. Early days of the internet, it was a very level playing field. And I started reaching out to small businesses in the New York area, entrepreneurs saying, hey, you can take on your bigger competitors. And that was an interesting backdrop for an emerging digital marketing agency business. And from the logos that you see here, eventually, you know, when that firm was acquired, I joined another shop as a managing partner. And globally, we worked with some incredible brands. And these are brands that, yes, we all know them. They're all household names, but why they matter to me and hopefully to you too, they have a lot of money to throw around. And what that has often translated to is innovative ways of measuring behavior and making investment decisions based on that. So when you think about these companies, I mean, basically every logo there has 9 or 10 figure marketing budget globally. How are they actually deciding how to deploy that massive amount of capital? And you know, what is the data and the signals that they're reading in order to do so? I learned a lot from those folks, and I ended up moving to Google, where you know, as less of a marketing practitioner, more of a sales leader, I worked with the automotive industry and led global strategy for a $1 billion vertical. It was you know, very exciting to be Google, an emerging partner in their world, as their manufacturing driven model was effectively winding down, and what's taking its place is more of a data enabled mobility model. So very interesting times. At some point, I also said, you know, I'm interested to see a little more about how other industries work. And I went into education, specifically ed tech, where we were working in communities to spin up large upskilling programs and help people navigate career pathways. People who couldn't get into a gainful career in technology through the higher ed system, which is increasingly exclusive to so many Americans. So we were using distance learning in the middle of the pandemic, using that as a lever to create economic opportunity. And I thought that was so much fun. It eventually brought me back to my entrepreneurial roots. And so Mission Flywheel, I work with growth stage companies, anywhere from pre-seed up to some Series A. And the focus really is with data at the core, helping founders and C-levels navigate all the complexity of a growing revenue organization, acknowledging that what got us from 0 to 1 isn't going to get us from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. The journey from infancy to toddlerhood is very different than those years that come next, right? And so really, we work basically by pulling together all of the hallmarks of a holistic revenue organization. And a lot of the themes that we're going to talk about today are very germane. So we'll start with the first one, which is the discovery phase. And how do you just buckle down and choose the exact problem you're solving, knowing that it's core to everything you are? So I'm actually going to make this interactive right here. See that QR code at the top left? If you could zap that, and it'll take you to a survey. It's one question. We're going to ask you, if you could ask one question to your ideal customer, what would you ask them? Maybe you've already done this. Maybe now that you've asked a customer, you've got something else you want to ask them. But what I'm trying to get at is, what are the things you don't know that if you had a captive audience of a customer, you would ask them? If it's not working, somebody please let me know. Love that one. What exactly drew you to our product? There's a variant of that I often use in a sales context, which is, why'd you take this meeting? Right? What is it about us that made us relevant to you? Great question to ask. It's as discovery questions go, that's about as good as they come. Tell me about the process of X. How can you make it better? So I could see this question actually applying both externally and internally. But I'm guessing, if you're sizing up your customer and you're saying, what do you sell? And how can I help you? I think that's a great question to be asking. Ask them to unpack their experience of going about their work and where their roadblocks are so that you can approach those with empathy. This is great. Who is the buyer and what do they care about? So again, I guess what we're doing is we're asking our customer to turn around and speak about their customer. Be interesting to get that question from an array of different people, right? Because if you ask a sales leader that question versus a head of operations or a head of research and development, you might get some interesting divergence in those answers. But I think it is a great question to be asking, especially what do they care about? How much would you be willing to pay for our technologies? Very direct, blunt, right to the point. I love it. That one, of course, it's contextually sensitive. You might not open your meeting with a question, about how much you're going to pay. You might ask them their name first, their title, and whatnot. But no, I agree that it's helpful to have some of that sense. Okay, a few more. What challenge stands between you and your success? Yeah, that's a positive way of spinning a different question that you sometimes hear, which is, what are your biggest threats, right? What are the hurdles you have to clear? We're always so pain focused. We want to solve a problem so we can put away, we can do away with your pain. But in fact, what you're saying here is, well, tell me about the things that don't give you anxiety. Tell us what you like and how we could 10x it or 100x it. There's an analogy we can make here, which we'll dabble in a little bit later in the session, um, about vitamins and painkillers. You're probably going to be one and not the other to your customer. And so, if they're taking a painkiller, well, that clearly means they've encountered a hurdle. If they're in the mood to take vitamins, this top question at the top here is a good one. What challenge stands between you and your success? How can I be the vitamin that is, going to get you there? Okay, I think we've got a good base here just to move into our, the next part of the discussion, which is really what can you do about it, right? So all of the questions that were just on the screen a moment ago, those are all questions that presently you may not have answers to. It's very natural, normal state of business that there are things we don't know. There are lots of unknown unknowns. So I like this analogy. If you were a cargo ship, let's say you're sailing across the Atlantic, right? There's risk right out there on the seas, right? There's choppy waters. And the analogy is, those choppy waters, think of it like it's foggy out there. You can't see everything with peak visibility. And why is it? Because it's normal to have blind spots. You can't possibly know everything you need to know. But if you are successful in basically absorbing intelligence to navigate around those blind spots, it's a much more intuitive process to just go from one port to the other port, smooth sailing, all your cargo intact, just drop it off and go. And so I want us to remember this, that the blind spots are a fact of life, but research is the way around it. And research can take many forms, but it's never been easier. It's never been cheaper, faster, or more effective. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what I mean. So as a consultant and a strategy partner to growth stage companies, one of the first things that I always tell them is how accessible your customer intelligence actually is. And if it's not your customer, it's your overall market. It could be your channel partners. It could be the competition, whatever you're trying to find. I love using this research platform called Pollfish. I'm not compensated by Pollfish, by the way. I just like their product, and I'll tell you about it. So it's a DIY market research platform. They're a research company that found there were small businesses, small projects that didn't necessarily qualify for how their business worked. But here's a self-serve platform where you can deploy a survey to 1,000 people and get answers in a couple of days. So you have tremendous reach, over 250 million people. And the experience is rolled out entirely within mobile apps. So only when they're on their smartphone or their tablet, cruising around the internet, playing Candy Crush and presented with the opportunity to get this, avatar, you could either pay $1 for it or you could answer this quick survey is kind of how it goes. Deployed across 160 countries, qualitative and quantitative. So you could just survey people and tabulate the results, but you could also just have a almost like a real-time conversation and more like a focus group, right? You can create these and deploy them quickly. There's a very precise set of tools for audience targeting, the demographics, and a whole lot more. And then, of course, a questionnaire, which further gets at the psychographics of your audience. If you're a research nerd like me, you can get into all kinds of testing frameworks and templates and whatnot. At the end of the day, the important thing for everybody, not just the research nerds, the quality of the data. They've used a lot of machine learning, kind of overlaying on their technology to spot fraudulent answers and some of the, the behaviors that compromise the data. I've run so many of these, always been happy with the quality. And why do I love this so much? Because it really is foundational to everything we do in a revenue organization. How many times do we hit a wall when writing a piece of ad creative, when considering, to advertise on a particular publication, developing a product feature, navigating some regulatory concern? You'll so often come back around to, well, we're doing it this way because we think the customer has this in mind. and we think, but we don't always know for sure. So the process that I've used is really, I'll kind of skip through this in detail. This is more of a, sort of commercial approach. But the idea is that what I try to do is make sure that businesses are armed and dangerous with real intelligence as early on in the process so that they can make smart decisions externally about how to communicate with their audience, but also internally, how to better run their business in pursuit of all their objectives. And the impact is the important piece. Better decision making, less risk, elimination of those blind spots. So this is a little bit of what it looks like, just to add a kind of a visual picture, a survey. It's unbelievably cheap. And then it turns into a lot of data visualizations, even among cohort audiences. So, if your app is, for example, you have a med device that caters to, a specific unit within a medical facility, you could look at the procurement people alongside the senior leadership, alongside the rank and file, and see how they answer differently to different questions. So that gives you a lot of really textured intelligence on what's happening, in the mind state of your ideal customer. And then we come up with an approach to actually respond and react. What I would offer to anybody on this call, since your early stage businesses with a lot of unknowns, I'm happy to have conversations about how you can actually do this for yourself. It takes some research sensibilities, but for the most part, they're also a very responsive team over at Polefish. So I'd be happy to discuss that with you. And that's a, open-ended offer. I want to make sure.
Excuse me, Paul.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
I just raised my hand. Marcel from Cat Innovation. Question here, because I mean, I like the what you were presenting on this Polefish survey platform. But what do you think about? I mean, about the Microsoft also forms. Do you think that Polefish is way better? That brings like more on the table as well?
What is the product? It's Microsoft
It's
Forms.
on Microsoft, yeah. Because my survey is all like 99% done on Microsoft right now.
Yes. Okay. Something that I should clarify, Marcel, and I'm glad you asked the question.
Thanks.
Polefish is not exclusively a survey tool, but it is a research platform. And
Okay.
the value of Polefish and what you're paying for is the panel. So give me like what's the, one, two sentences about your business, Marcel?
We're working on a non-invasive smart clothing bone growth technology for people affected by osteoporosis in a way to reduce the risk of fracture.
Okay. Who's your main buyer?
That would be, I mean, prescribed by doctors, but anyone over the age of 50 as a preventive solution.
Okay. So this is a B2C product.
Yeah, I mean, that could be B2B to C because of the fact that it has to be prescribed.
Right.
Yeah.
So that channel you could handle one way. B2C actually works the best with these research platforms because there's more of them, right? There's
Yeah.
there's there's 200 million of those versus a much smaller niche in any B2B category. But effectively, you probably have some basic understanding of demographics. The age. There might be certain geographies where
Yeah,
this
because the
particular.
end user is like the patient at home, so yeah. So that
So there are probably some conditions or some um, predictive factors. You might say this typically affects people in urban areas, or this is much more common at lower income levels because of dietary. I don't know. Whatever the case
yeah.
may be, you can use basic targeting according to all the demographics. You can also target by certain occupations. If this were an occupational hazard, you could say, I want people in construction, urban, rural, suburban areas, wherever it may be. So picture
Incomes, I could imagine as well.
absolutely income bands,
Okay.
education, children in household, all of that. You have an
Okay.
unbelievable amount of data at your fingertips, and you create an audience. And that initial 250 million might get whittled down to a million. But when that survey goes live, my guess is a survey like that, could probably get a few thousand results in a matter of days. Now, a product like Microsoft Forms, I believe, certainly an equivalent like Google Forms, it does all the surveying. It can do all the visualization of data in Sheets or wherever.
But
Uh,
that's it.
but who's the audience? Where
Yeah.
it's has to be. So you have to provide the audience. That's what Polefish delivers, which is so compelling.
Yeah. Thank you. I
Make
appreciate
sense?
it.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about positioning. I want to look at it through three lenses: your customer, your competitor, and your overall category. Um, so with customers, think about it as just who you serve, right? And it's rooted in that deep understanding. So everything I just told you in the last section, this is why I'm saying it, because if your positioning truly starts with your customer, then you really begin to know who you are by answering these questions. And some of these came up during the interactive piece. What problems do you face? What outcomes do you seek? And so really the goal here is just to align your product. So I have the solution for what ails you is really what it comes down to. Now, differently from your competition, now you're saying, who are we up against? And it's really about understanding and having a very long list of direct and indirect competitors. I would argue the indirect list is the more important one, because if we're talking about strategic planning, then you need to be thinking about the niche of the market that you're in, as well as the overlaps with all the adjacent niches around you. So we could unpack a variety of business cases, based on companies represented on this call. And if we have time later, we should. But what I'll say is that, you'll, especially nowadays, how often do you hear that people's business concept really comes down to a mashup of other well-known concepts, right? We are the Airbnb for Sony PlayStation users. I don't know, whatever it might be, there's always this overlap. And so I think it's important to think about that indirect list of competitors who maybe are all in on something that you're only halfway in on, right? Or vice versa. And then really, how do you uniquely solve this problem better, faster, and more effectively? Because standing out is not just, it's not just about identifying and isolating yourself. You also have to actually create distance between you and all these other characters. So now we'll get to the category. The last piece is the market context. And that really comes down to comparison. So now that you know your customer and you know who else your customer is looking at, now you're basically starting to zoom out and think about the context. In what context are they seeing me next to all these other players? And it gets even more interesting when you consider, is it a new category? Are you maybe in the conversation with the wrong players? Burger King keeps on getting compared to McDonald's, whereas maybe they want to be more in the conversation of a Wendy's. Maybe not the best example. Those three seem pretty similar to me, but I think we all know examples of brands that have done this. And it's certainly there's no exception in venture-backed companies that maybe don't have global brands yet, but still have to think about this type of positioning. So are you creating a new one? Or are you redefining an existing category? And how well is that space known? You could work really hard to establish yourself, to beat your chest and say, we've arrived. We are the only one that does this for this with that. But if people don't grasp the overall category and they don't understand the value at a macro level, then it becomes very difficult to get people to care about your position at a micro level. So with all of this in mind, we'll just kind of jog our memory here. We're solving a problem. It's based either on pain and the medicine you're offering, or it's based on that pleasure and you pivoting to be more of a vitamin. But then, there's a question of why you. How do you do it differently? Why don't the other ways work? Again, as I said earlier, right? Creating that distance with your competition basically is all wrapped up in the answer to that question. Why don't the other ways work? Now, I want to zoom in on a little mini case study here about unique selling proposition. I'm going to assume everyone here is familiar with Duolingo. If you're not, best language app in history. Why? Because they've figured out gamification better than anyone. They took subject matter which sorely needed it, and they applied all the fun bells and whistles to just make it fun. And it's bite-sized, and it's sticky, and it's memorable. Duolingo makes language learning accessible, fun, and effective for everyone. So that is marketing communications. That's not me extemporaneously making it up. How? Well, because, like I said, gamification is the key to it. But the taglines they use: learn a language for free forever. The world's best way to learn a language. So let's look at each of these, right? Learning a language for free immediately addresses some pain, right? Because in a pre-Duolingo world, if anybody ever had to take a Berlitz course or something and saw the sticker price when they submitted to finance their expense report, you'd be like, wow, languages are expensive. The alternative being great way to learn a language, immerse yourself in a culture, right? But that too is expensive in a different way. So immediately, just with one word, free, they've addressed that pain. And forever. Forever basically implies either you're going to want to do it forever because it's so fun, or we're going to be here for you forever. Either way, it's positive, right? And the world's best way to learn a language, beautifully simple. Luckily, they were in a privileged position to have the clout to say so. There truly isn't anyone else that's doing it better. So we're going to use that box that you see on the right as a little bit of inspiration for a little exercise. And I'm going to ask someone to volunteer, so just get ready for that. Consider these 5 points that make up your USP statement. Who, what, how, what is the alternative, and how do you differentiate? So if anyone here is familiar with Mad Libs, if you ever flip through a Mad Libs book and played it as a kid, if you're not familiar, I'll tell you, picture, a story with a bunch of blanks where all the nouns, verbs, and adjectives have been taken out of the text. And then on the back page, there's just a list: 1 noun, 2 verb, 3 adjective. And you, without the context of the whole story, start filling in nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And there's no rhyme or reason to how you do it. And so once you copy those words back over to the original, it usually sounds ridiculous, and it's absolutely hilarious. So what if you did the same thing with your business? Look at how Duolingo did it, right? We help language learners, that's the who, achieve their desired level of fluency, that's the what, by gamifying the learning process, that's the how. Unlike textbooks and tutors, the alternative, we make lessons bite-sized and convenient. Excuse me. So having differentiated it, they've really checked all 5 boxes. And I would invite you to try something similar. Sorry, I skipped ahead there. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer. Anyone in the crowd want to take a crack at filling in the who, what, how, the alternative, and the differentiation, and giving us 2 sentences like the one we have on the screen right now?
Do you want it to do it live, or we have to go on your application, the app that you, the link that you sent? No,
No, just
verbally.
You can speak it out. Yeah.
I can try.
Okay.
Okay, so it's ASTAT is the name of our technology. ASTAT is a non-invasive smart clothing solution that uses electrical stimulation to strengthen bones and reduce fracture risk in osteoporosis patients, offering a drug-free alternative to medication with a comfortable, wearable design.
Okay, so the who that I heard was osteoporosis patients, right?
Yeah.
What actually was the first thing you said, which was a non-invasive, say it again?
Smart clothing solution.
Smart clothing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse my French.
No problem. And remind me the process, the how?
It's through electrical stimulation.
Okay. And then the alternative was it just
I
traditional
mean,
clothing?
I mean, the alternative is the fact that there's medication, so it's an alternative to medication.
Okay, nice. And then the way you differentiate,
Uh, that's a good point. I mean, the fact that it's non-invasive, it's drug-free alternative. Yeah, that would be drug-free.
okay. So if I was to apply that to the framework exactly the way we have it there, we help patients with osteoporosis. Um, we actually haven't framed number two, so I'm going to stop myself. We haven't framed number two in the context of what they achieve. Now, achieve could be swapped with a different word, but I assume that what we're actually selling here is not so much the non-invasive smart clothing solution, but the condition of a patient whose pain has been resolved. Um, what does that look like exactly?
It's not that pain. It's more like the fact that we strengthen bones to which reduce the risk of fracture on people that are affected by osteoporosis.
Got it. Perfect. So we help patients of osteoporosis achieve stronger bones by a proprietary process of electrical stimulation. Unlike the traditional medications that these patients take, we offer a drug-free solution that is non-invasive, a non-invasive drug-free solution. How does that sound?
Sounds good. And remind me, the session is recorded, right?
It is. It is.
Great. That
Um,
sounds that's better. Yeah.
So, I mean, it actually, you had most of the pieces. I think the only major change we made was that the second what, we framed it a little differently. We
Yeah.
said, we help you not with this thing, but we help you achieve a state, right?
Yeah.
We're helping,
Yeah.
and I think that matters a lot. So I think now, you've all got an example of how this can be done, and this can be done independently. And so I urge you all to give it a try, and let me know how it works out. But I will skip ahead
Thank
to
you.
third. You're welcome. Your third and final section: define what success looks like. So measurement. Some people shy away from this topic, and it's the same way, some people shy away from creative decisions in, advertising and media because people say, well, my brain isn't wired that way. I'm not a creative. Okay, well, everyone has a capacity for creativity, and everyone has a capacity for being analytical. It's really just a question of what they enjoy and what they feel comfortable measuring, right? And so and how. Um, let's all embrace the measurement topic because without the data, without the insights that come from the data, it becomes very hard to run our business. It becomes hard to lead and inspire our teams. It becomes potentially very hard to keep investors believing in us. Um, and it really also, becomes really difficult to overcome some of those aforementioned blind spots that we've talked about. And so I always urge people get over if you have hangups about working with data, you want to get over them, but it's an easier world than you're expecting because the truth is there's really only two kinds of data. There is the leading indicators and the lagging indicators. And anyone familiar with economics 101 knows these terms, but if you don't know them, basically one of them is the leading indicators are a predictive evaluation of your future success. The lagging indicators are looking backwards and saying, how did we do? Um, Suffice to say, the lagging indicators are more reliable than leading indicators. However, the lagging indicators are not as innately connected to action because the action's already happened. So if you're going to use lagging indicators, you want to make sure that you're diligent about holding yourself accountable to the actions that will result. just to recap, prediction of future performance, proactive, actionable, and help guide decision-making. The lagging indicators measure in the past. They're looking backward. Important for reflection. I would say maybe not always driving change in real time. So let's look at some examples. On the y-axis here, you've got different departments within the company. So you might have co-founders that are responsible for each of these. You might also be looking at each of these yourself. I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, I do all the marketing and sales, all the HR, all the finance. How many times have we heard that, right? But if you were responsible just for product, for example, you look at your leading indicators and you would think, okay, we're going to launch this feature. We think it'll be adopted this much. Well, it certainly would be nice to also look at that on a lagging basis, except that if a feature hasn't been rolled out yet, you just don't have it. What you can look at is the overall experience and say that feature and all the other features we've brought to market together, do they keep people on the platform? Are we able to retain 90% month over month, or 95 or 98? So that would be like a practical way of looking at it. And for each of the business functions listed here, you see examples. I'm certainly curious to hear if anyone in the audience has any particular metrics that they either strongly believe in or perhaps have run into some difficulty measuring. Tell me if there are any challenges with measurement in your business. All right, I'll park that question for now. If you come up with any, certainly feel free to chime in. What I would say is keep, a couple of sort of philosophical points in mind. Focus on what you can control today, right? It's as it is. Founders have to have a vicious combination, a desire for control. It's innate in all of us, right? And at the same time, we're constantly bumping up against things we can't control. In my mind, that's one of the hardest things about being a founder. Focus on what you can control. Tracking trends and leading indicators so that you can see things on the horizon. You can identify risks or opportunities. It definitely cuts both ways. And then use the lagging indicators to validate. So once upon a time, we had a problem. I had a hypothesis, and this is the action we took. We waited X amount of time, and now the metrics are coming in like this. Did we do a good job? Did we do an awful job? Did we do a mediocre job? What have we learned in the process? And I think it's most effective when you rigidly set time-bound milestones for this. So if you're going to conduct a test, any researcher will tell you, if you have a hypothesis, you're going to try and prove it, have an idea of how much data you need, and cap it and say 30 days is enough time to see if this process is working. So on day 31, we're going to meet, we're going to have a postmortem. That's how it works. Okay, going back to that three-piece, that three-part visual that we worked with earlier, customers, competitors, and category. I'm just going to kind of take the measurement topic and apply it here. With customers, why are you doing it? You're doing it to measure your fit and the level of engagement you're getting. Now, some of those metrics at the top are tried and true. You're all thinking about them, or if you're not, there's a perfectly good reason. But acquisition cost, net promoter score, these are well known. Think also about picking apart your business a bit more and starting to segment a little bit. Think about upsells and cross-sells. That first contract, whenever it becomes a second contract, is it the same size? Can you add on other things? Can you lengthen the time horizon? Or if you drop things, can you deliver something more profitably and efficiently? All of these would be different ways of looking at expansion revenue. If you've ever talked to people in the SaaS business, they understand the minutia of segmenting these different revenue streams because it's very complex in that respect. There can be a lot of different moving parts. Another one that I like to think about is the support tickets. Nobody ever thinks about the relevance of support metrics to other aspects of the sales cycle, but the way you create demand can be informed and really kind of stimulated with some metrics that you pull out of your customer success department. Ditto how your salespeople are actually going to close these prospective clients. Ditto what their first pilot or what their first contract looks like. And then down the road, it can influence, are they going to come back? Are they going to refer other customers? If you want to achieve absolute enlightenment in a revenue organization, you've got many, many customers, maybe all your customers that are referring you to other customers, because every one of those takes budget right away from marketing and allows you to spend it on other things. You don't need to spend all that money to acquire customers. And I'm a lifelong marketer. I believe in the marketing function, but I will never say spend just because. If you can avoid spending on marketing, by all means, you want to avoid it. So let's move on. Competitors, you're tracking your competitive strength and your market position. We all know what brand awareness looks like and means and how it's measured. Share of voice is more of a media metric, but there are different ways. At the top of the list there, you're seeing some of the traditional ones, but how about some of these other ones? The feature adoption rate. So if your industry is moving in a certain direction and all the players are seeing that trend and finding ways to embrace it, who's actually like in the customer landscape? How much are they adopting them? How much are they really embracing these products? Competitor mentions is a great one too. I skipped over that, but it's always very interesting. Back in my agency days, we used to use social media monitoring tools for our customers, and we would basically put their brand name in and see everywhere it was mentioned across the social web, in a publisher context, like bloggers, influencers, even forums, message boards, Reddit, and whatnot. What you get at scale is a fascinating picture of how that brand's perceived. And these tools nowadays can do really sophisticated sentiment analysis. So if your CEO gets on a call with an analyst and commits a faux pas, you might see within 48 hours, the social web just explodes with a bunch of negative mentions. And now you at least have that data point to respond to. That's one of many, many use cases for competitor mentions. The last piece here, category. We all know, probably already all measuring our revenue growth, our gross margin. If there's revenue, we're counting it, right? But looking at things like, can we actually close business faster than others in our category? Or I love this last one, the zombie subscription rate. How many of our users are actually using it? Because if you scored a contract and the customer basically just needed to spend the budget and doesn't actually know what they're doing with the product, are they likely to renew? Are they likely to evangelize? No and no. And so that's a churn risk that we always want to be looking out for. Suffice to say, each of these lists could be infinitely long. And I urge you to bring all your creativity to the table and think about what are the best ways we can measure on behalf of all of our stakeholders. Okay, we are 10 minutes to the hour, so this leaves a little bit of time if there are questions. If anybody wants to bring, their own sort of business challenges to the table, I'd love to hear about them.
I do have a question, Paul.
Yes.
I mean, would you be available at to meet for I don't know, like a 30-minute or maybe an hour, to discuss like precisely about my project?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. This is something I do a lot. I work through accelerators, and, mentor, advise, coach young founders or, founders of young companies, whichever one you may be. And I enjoy it very much. So I'm happy to offer that to anybody, just a session to sort of hash out what's going on in your business.
Yeah, yeah. Are you close to? You're in Chicago, right? Are you
I am
close to
not.
mHUB? You're not. Okay.
I am based in New York.
Okay. So that would
So
be remotely,
unfortunately,
but that's fine.
yeah.
No, I mean we're used to it, so that's fine. So, yeah, we're gonna get your presentation anyway, and I assume that we'll get your email somewhere.
Yes, I can even just put it right in the chat here.
That would
And
be great.
I see
And it
there's
seems
also
that
a question.
there is a
Um,
question.
There's a question from Josh. As it relates to challenges, we found having a waiting list for our devices hasn't really been useful either for validating the market or attracting new potential customers. I think that's a good insight, Josh. Sometimes what looks relevant at the start, over time, we realize, hey, it doesn't actually move the needle. So thank you for that. I just added my email and LinkedIn,
Yeah.
as well as the company's website. Lanice, I don't know if you're still with us. Don't know
Thank
if
you.
I could try real quickly, Paul, just before you
Yeah.
wind down. Just for the others on the call, I met Paul maybe 6 months ago, maybe a little more than that, 8 months ago, in Boston, and we did some work with Paul over a couple of months on a high-level go-to-market strategy that we added to our deck as we initiated institutional raise, and it was very, very valuable, important work that was done. So anyway, that's just a little live whatever estimate to Paul's caliber.
I appreciate that, Mike. Perfect example of a customer, that's becoming an evangelist. I'd like to think, it's also because you and your team invested so much in planning and documenting and really thinking through. One of the things that impressed me about your business, Mike, is that you always knew the problem you were trying to solve, and it truly seemed to be at the core of everything you were doing. And so I think that's why, we were able to achieve a lot in 2 months of working together, was just because that central insight I think was just so thoroughly vetted. And I think it's, this is why it's good that you're all in a cohort, because founders, by definition, they're going through it for the first time. Even if you founded 10 companies, right? This is your first go around with this company, which means you start to spot things, problems, and you start to, quickly work up solutions just, in real time. And yet they're all so unique, from one company to the next one, right? And so there's so much learning that can happen just by being in a forum where you can say, hey, look, like we're doing great on this, we struggle with that, and everybody's in the trenches going through it. So I hope this experience has been awesome for you at mHUB. Certainly it's a respected institution within the venture community, but I truly hope that everyone's having a great time with this cohort.
Yeah, it's exceeded my expectations. There's about 3 or 4 other people on this call, also from my cohort. There's people also on this call that are not in my cohort, so just come from the broader mHUB community. But I can tell you from my you're absolutely right. It's what I've learned from Marcel, from Josh, from Ola. I'm not looking at the whole screen. All these guys have contributed to Crimson Scientific in ways they don't even know yet.
You know what, Michael? Michael is too humble, so we're learning a lot from him as well. So we like every day we're impressed about his success. I mean, his what he's achieving, and that's great. So anyway, I think we're like we have a good group, and that we created some kind of a community, and we're helping each other. And like hearing Michael talking about you, and I already asked you to meet, and that convinced me I like to do it for sure. Thanks, Mike.
Anything else from the folks, other folks on the call? I appreciate your time and attention, especially if you're a basketball fan, because you could be watching the best basketball of the year right now, and you instead chose to spend it with me. So thank you.
Or if you're like me, you're multitasking.
That's right.
And if you're in
Thank you, Paul.
today, if you're in person today, we're actually streaming it in the event space. So
All right.
just calling that out. Paul, thank you so much for leading this workshop. Everybody on the line, I'll follow up with resources and include this recording in my email as well.
I need the recording.
I got you.
There's something that I need from it. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Nice to
Thanks,
see you.
Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
So long.